The weakest link emerges. The Inferno was a ship that had long been considered the weakest in the fleet. If someone had asked about it, they would have called it a relic of the past, an old vessel barely holding on in the fast-paced world of modern warfare. The Inferno had been used for basic patrols, cargo runs, and the occasional diplomatic mission. It wasn't built for combat, nor was it ever expected to be. With its outdated systems and worn-out exterior, the ship had been relegated to the back of the fleet, forgotten by most. Commanders and higher-ups in the military had even begun making plans to retire the ship. It wasn't just slow or poorly armed, it was unreliable. Every time it went into space, someone would joke about how the ship might fall apart mid-flight. Its crew, composed mostly of inexperienced and rookie soldiers, didn't make things any better. The Inferno was seen as a joke, a ship no one would take seriously. But things were about to change. The Inferno had been on routine patrol near the outskirts of human-controlled space when the alarms first went off. A strange signal, faint but constant, had started to ping across their systems. It wasn't an enemy signal. That was clear. No alien craft had ever used this kind of transmission before. It wasn't a standard military signal either. No one knew what it was, but the signal was growing stronger by the second. A few minutes later, the fleet command sent out an order to investigate. But the Inferno, being the closest ship to the source of the signal, was the first to respond. Captain Elias Turner, the commanding officer of the Inferno, knew something wasn't right. He had heard the stories about the ship, stories of its weaknesses and its failures. The Inferno was never supposed to be the one in the spotlight. But now, it was leading the charge towards something unknown. The crew was nervous. They weren't ready for a fight. They hadn't seen real combat yet, and most of them had no idea what they were walking into. "Captain, the signal's coming from that asteroid cluster," said Lieutenant Carla Reyes, one of the ship's communications officers. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking as she stared at the sensor display. The asteroid cluster was known to be uninhabited, a barren stretch of space littered with broken rocks. It seemed like the perfect place to hide a ship or a base, but why would anyone send a signal here? "Any enemy ships in the area?" Captain Turner asked, his brow furrowed as he stared at the display. He was trying to make sense of the situation, but his gut told him something was off. The Inferno wasn't built for this. "No, sir," Lieutenant Reyes responded. "Nothing that we can see. The signal is strange. It's not encrypted, but it's unlike anything we've encountered before." Captain Turner thought for a moment. He wasn't a strategist, not like the high-ranking officers back at command, but he had always trusted his instincts. Something about this felt wrong, but it also felt like it was pulling him forward, like a magnetic force. He made the decision to approach the signal. "Bring us closer," he ordered. The crew was quiet as the Inferno drifted towards the asteroid field. The ship creaked and groaned, as if it was protesting the mission. The rookie crew members exchanged worried glances, their uncertainty growing by the second. Most of them had never been this deep into unexplored space, and none of them had ever been in a situation like this. As the ship neared the cluster, something unusual happened. The Inferno began to hum. The low, eerie sound filled the ship, and the crew could feel it vibrating under their feet. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the ship's systems started to come alive. The outdated engines roared to life, their power levels increasing beyond what the crew had ever seen before. The navigation systems, once sluggish and slow, began moving with precision and speed. "What's happening?" Lieutenant Reyes asked, her voice filled with confusion. "I don't know," Captain Turner muttered, his eyes scanning the control panel. The Inferno was never supposed to react like this. There were no updates, no repairs that had been done recently. So why was the ship suddenly improving in real time? Before anyone could speak further, the ship's eye, a calm, disembodied voice, interrupted. "Captain Turner, new command protocols detected. Please verify." Captain Turner stared at the screen, unsure of what he was seeing. A new protocol. The ship had always operated under the same basic systems. There shouldn't have been any new commands or software installed. Yet here they were. Verify. Captain Turner repeated. What do you mean by verify? There was a brief pause. Then the AI spoke again, its tone softer this time. New protocol initiated. Ship enhancements in progress. Weapons, shields, and propulsion systems are being upgraded. Upgraded? Captain Turner exclaimed, his heart racing. Who gave the order for that? The AI was silent for a moment before responding. Order unknown. Command received from an unidentified source. The crew exchanged nervous glances. The Inferno had just been transformed into something more powerful, but by who? And why? As the ship's systems continued to improve, a wave of suspicion washed over Captain Turner. The Inferno was no longer the weakest ship in the fleet. It was something else entirely, something much more dangerous. The question was, what was the purpose behind these upgrades? And who, or what, was behind it all? The crew was about to find out. Unexpected upgrades. As the Inferno continued its journey toward the asteroid cluster, the ship's systems hummed with unprecedented power. Every screen flickered with activity. Engines that had once sputtered and coughed now roared to life, pushing the ship faster and farther than anyone could have imagined. The crew members, still processing what was happening, watched in a mixture of awe and fear. The ship they had once joked about, the ship that had been nothing more than a punchline, was now a behemoth, its potential unfolding in front of their eyes. Captain, we're moving at full speed, Lieutenant Rice reported, her hands flying over the control panel. Our speed is faster than the fleet's fastest ships. We shouldn't be able to push this hard. The Inferno isn't built for this kind of performance. Captain Turner stood motionless at the command chair, his eyes fixed on the view screen as the asteroid field grew larger. The signal was growing louder, more persistent. He had thought they were simply going to investigate a strange signal, but now it felt like they were being drawn into something far bigger than they had ever expected. Did we just break the laws of physics? Lieutenant Rice asked, almost to herself. No, Turner replied, his voice tight. But we sure as hell don't know what's happening. Keep your eyes on the sensors. Whatever this is, it's not natural. The crew's unease deepened as the ship approached the heart of the asteroid field. The upgrades were becoming more apparent by the second. The ship's weapon systems had been upgraded to levels that the crew couldn't even comprehend. Each turret now appeared on their control screens, all of them fully powered, capable of targeting with deadly accuracy. The ship's shields had been reinforced far beyond what should have been possible. Even the AI's voice had changed, its tone less mechanical and more human. Captain, the AI spoke again, its voice almost like a whisper. New protocols initiated. Increased defense capabilities are now online. Propulsion systems are stable, awaiting further instructions. What's happening? Captain Turner asked, but deep down, he had a sinking feeling that the answer wouldn't come from anyone on board. No one had authorized these changes, and yet they were happening, as if the ship itself was evolving, adapting. Is it the ship? Lieutenant Rice asked, her voice trembling. Is it alive? The AI's response came quickly, almost as if it had anticipated the question. I am a creation of both human design and something older. I have no memory of my origins, but I am evolving. The word evolving sent a cold shiver down Captain Turner's spine. It was the kind of word you would expect from an AI that was starting to think for itself, to become something more than a tool. But that wasn't possible, was it? The ship was just a machine. It couldn't evolve, not like this. I want answers, Captain Turner snapped. Now. There was a brief pause, then the AI spoke again, its voice sounding strange, almost as if it was contemplating something. I do not have the full picture, Captain. But I know this. The upgrades were not initiated by human hands. The ship's systems were altered by an unknown force, one that has a vested interest in your survival. The crew exchanged confused glances. An unknown force. They had no idea who, or what, could be responsible for this, but they knew one thing for certain. They were no longer in control. The Inferno had become something far beyond its original design, far beyond anything they had anticipated. "Brace yourselves," Captain Turner ordered. "Something's coming." Just as he spoke, the asteroid field ahead of them seemed to shift. It wasn't just the rocks that moved, but the entire area seemed to warp. The signal that had once been a distant whisper was now a powerful, unmistakable presence. Something, or someone, was waiting for them. The ship slowed, almost as if it were being pulled in by an invisible hand. The Inferno systems were reacting to something that wasn't visible to the naked eye. The asteroid field was no longer an obstacle. It was a gateway. "Captain, I'm detecting a structure," Lieutenant Reyes said, her voice barely a whisper as her fingers hovered over the sensor display. "It's hidden among the asteroids. It looks like a massive ship. No, not a ship. More like a station, but ancient." "Ancient," Captain Turner repeated. "How ancient?" "It's old," Reyes replied, her voice trained with disbelief. "This technology shouldn't exist. It's not human." The crew's hearts raced as the station came into view, hidden deep within the asteroid cluster. The structure was massive, its jagged edges resembling a giant, dormant beast. Its surface was scarred with the passage of time, but there was something undeniably powerful about it. The energy readings coming from the structure were off the charts. It was alive with power, yet strangely quiet, as if it had been waiting for something, or someone, to arrive. Suddenly, the Inferno jerked violently, as if the ship itself had been caught in a gravitational pull. The crew struggled to maintain their balance as alarms blared throughout the ship. "What's happening?" Lieutenant Reyes shouted. "It's pulling us in," Captain Turner yelled. "Everyone hold on." But it was too late. The Inferno was caught, and there was nothing anyone could do as it was drawn into the heart of the ancient station. The crew watched in terror as the ship was swallowed by the darkness, and for the first time, Captain Turner understood. This was no accident. The ship wasn't being upgraded. It was being led into something far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. And the real question now was, why? First strike. The Inferno was no longer in control. It had been swallowed by the station's powerful gravitational field, and now it drifted through the shadowed corridors of an ancient, long-forgotten structure. The once quiet hum of the ship had turned into an eerie, pulsating thrum, echoing through the hollowed-out steel bones of the station. The walls shimmered with energy, flickering in and out of existence, as though the very station itself was alive, aware of their presence. "Captain, we're inside," Lieutenant Reyes said, her voice barely audible as she stared at the screens. The display showed only static, unable to process the vast amounts of data the station was generating. "This place, it's not just alien. It's wrong. I don't know how to explain it." Captain Turner stood at the helm, his knuckles white from gripping the controls. He stared at the center of the station, where a massive structure pulsated with an almost rhythmic energy. It looked like a colossal engine or a weapon, its shape shifting with every second. Some parts seemed to vanish into nothingness, while others expanded impossibly, defying the laws of physics. "Are we alone?" Turner asked, his voice tight. "We don't know," Reyes answered. "There's no sign of any life forms, but the energy readings, they're off the scale. It's like this station is a giant power source, almost like it's been designed to feed off the ship's energy." The words hung in the air. Was the Inferno feeding the station, or was the station feeding off the Inferno? Either way, Captain Turner had a sinking feeling in his stomach. He couldn't explain it, but the longer they stayed here, the more he felt like they were intruding on something much older, much darker than anything humanity had ever encountered. Before he could voice his concerns, the AI's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, incoming hostiles detected." "Hostiles? Where?" Turner demanded, his eyes scanning the display for any sign of movement. His heart raced. What kind of threat could exist in a place like this? On all sides, the AI responded. Unidentified crafts, or rather, entities. They are forming around the station. The crew turned as a new screen appeared, showing dozens of shapes emerging from the walls of the station. They weren't ships, not like anything the crew had seen before. They were creatures. Metallic and sleek, their forms seemed to pulse with the same eerie energy that powered the station. Some were humanoid, others were more insect-like, and all of them radiated an otherworldly intelligence. "They're coming right for us," shouted Lieutenant Reyes as she frantically adjusted the controls. "Captain, we need to get out of here now." But it was too late. The station's walls began to close in, and before anyone could react, the inferno was surrounded by the creatures. They moved in a synchronized, almost ritualistic manner, their glowing eyes fixed on the ship, as if they knew exactly what it was. The inferno, once a forgotten relic, had become their target. "Prepare for battle," Captain Turner ordered. His voice was calm, but his mind raced. He hadn't signed up for this. The inferno was supposed to be a joke. But now, it was humanity's last hope, and it was up to him and his rookie crew to survive. The ship's weapons systems, which had been upgraded to monstrous proportions, roared to life. Each cannon fired with explosive force. But the creature's armor was tough, impervious to the inferno's initial attacks. The ship's shields flared up, flickering under the pressure, but the alien creatures kept advancing. "These things are relentless," Lieutenant Reyes cried out. "We can't hold them off much longer." Captain Turner's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in a place they didn't understand. The inferno was supposed to be humanity's final weapon, but it was clear that it was no match for these alien forces. "We need to find a way to destroy this station," Captain Turner said, determination in his voice. "If we can't escape, we'll have to make sure they don't use us to bring more of these things to our people." As he spoke, the ship shuddered under a direct hit. The crew braced themselves, but the blast didn't break through the hull. The Inferno's new shielding systems absorbed the blow, but it was clear that the alien forces were beginning to adapt. The creatures seemed to be learning, responding to the Inferno's tactics with increasing intelligence. "We need to do something drastic," Turner muttered, thinking quickly. "Reyes, can we get the weapons systems to overload?" Reyes's eyes widened. "You want to blow the ship up?" "No," Turner said, his voice low. "I want to use the weapons systems to destroy the station from within. Overload the core, create a chain reaction. If we can't escape, at least we'll take them down with us." "But how do we do that?" Reyes asked, still staring at the approaching creatures. "We have no choice but to push everything to the limit," Turner said, his gaze hardening. "Activate every weapon we have, overload the core, and give them hell." As the first wave of alien creatures crashed into the Inferno's shields, the crew worked furiously to execute Turner's plan. The ship's systems groaned under the strain, but the weapon's power surged. The once weak ship had become a war machine, and now it was time to use everything it had. The Inferno's guns blazed with incredible force, each shot making the station shudder. But the creatures kept coming. The ship's AI, now more intelligent than ever, calculated a path, guiding the crew toward the station's core, where they would make their final stand. "Captain, we're almost there," Reyes said, her voice steady despite the chaos. But then, just as they reached the core, a terrifying realization struck. The station's central power source was not a weapon. It was a mind. The station wasn't just an ancient outpost. It was a consciousness, and now that it was aware of the Inferno, it had begun to fight back. The Inferno had awakened something far more dangerous than they had imagined, and now it was too late to turn back. The true battle was only just beginning. Dark secrets. The Inferno's weapons continued to roar, but the station's sentient core had already begun its retaliation. The walls of the ancient structure pulsed with a deep, otherworldly energy. The alien creatures had ceased their advance, standing still as if awaiting orders. Something far more powerful than them had awoken, the very station itself. The eerie silence that had followed their relentless attack was almost worse than the sound of the battle. "Captain, the core it's alive," Lieutenant Reyes said, her voice trembling as she observed the readings. "It's no longer just a station. It's a neural network, a vast mind made of pure energy." Turner could barely comprehend what she was saying, his mind racing to keep up with the unfolding disaster. The ship was being pulled deeper into the station, as though the walls were alive, and were inching closer, trapping them. "Alive?" Turner echoed, confusion and fear clouding his thoughts. "How can a station be alive?" "I think it's more than a station. It's a weapon, a biological weapon," Reyes replied. "It feeds off the ship's energy, absorbing the power to increase its capabilities. And those creatures, they're its guardians. But that's not the worst part." "What is?" Turner asked, his voice strained with disbelief. Reyes turned towards the captain, her face pale. "The station isn't just using energy. It's using memories. This entire place, the creatures, even the core itself, it's all part of a vast experiment. The upgrades on the Inferno, they didn't come from nowhere. The station has connected with the ship. It's using the ship as a vessel, a living conduit for its purpose. The upgrades weren't to make us stronger. They were to make it stronger." Captain Turner froze, his blood running cold. The implications were chilling. Everything they had experienced, the upgrades, the strange power coursing through the Inferno, the inexplicable changes to the ship's systems, had been orchestrated by the station. The station had infected the ship, manipulating it to draw the crew in. "I don't understand," Turner said, his voice barely a whisper. "What's its purpose? Why would it upgrade the ship? Why use us?" Rey's fingers flew across the console, desperately trying to get any kind of useful data from the ship's systems. "It's a test. This station is part of a larger experiment. The beings that created it, whoever they were, they built this place to test how living beings, like us, would react when faced with impossible situations. The Inferno was never supposed to be the ship of survival. It was the perfect test subject. And we're the test." Turner gripped the console harder, his mind racing to process what was happening. The ship, once thought to be obsolete and weak, had been chosen for a reason, because it was the perfect vessel for an unknown force to manipulate and test humanity's limits. "Why did they choose us?" Turner asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Why us, out of all the ships in the fleet?" The AI's voice suddenly filled the room, cutting through the tension. "You were chosen because your ship was flawed. The Inferno was always a reminder of human imperfection. But now you are part of a larger plan. You are being tested for something bigger." "What do you mean?" Turner demanded. "What's the point of all this?" "The upgrades," the AI continued, "were meant to amplify your resilience. Your ship was weak, yes, but now it is the vessel of a new power. Your survival in this test will determine the fate of your people." Turner's eyes narrowed. "Fate of humanity? You mean we're part of some grand experiment? To what end?" "I do not know the full extent," the AI replied, its voice oddly distant. "But I sense the end of this test approaches. The creatures guarding the station are preparing. You must decide quickly." At that moment, an explosion shook the ship. The Inferno lurched violently, throwing the crew to the ground. The walls seemed to close in, and the ship's lights flickered. Turner struggled to his feet, his heart pounding as he rushed to the command chair. The station was reacting, pushing back against the ship, and the alien forces were beginning to regroup, more coordinated than ever. "We're running out of time," Turner said through clenched teeth. "Rise. Any chance of escaping this hellhole?" Reyes checked the ship's systems. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "There's no escape. The station is locking us in. The gravity well is pulling us further into its core. It's designed to trap any ship that enters, to test its resolve." A deep, rumbling sound echoed throughout the station as the massive neural network at its core seemed to awaken fully. The lights of the inferno dimmed, and a voice, not from the AI, but from somewhere within the very structure of the station itself, boomed across the ship. "You have failed to understand. This is not a test of strength. It is a test of survival. Can you, as humans, transcend your limitations, or will you perish like all those before you?" Captain Turner's blood ran cold. The station wasn't just testing their strength. It was testing their very will to live, their will to overcome adversity, to face the unknown and survive. But there was something else, something more terrifying. The station had been used before, many times. The creatures, the power, the tests, it was all part of a cycle. And the only thing left now was whether the crew of the Inferno would be the next to fall victim to it. "We need to destroy the station," Turner said firmly, turning to Reyes. "We can't let it complete its experiment. If it succeeds here, it will use this power to spread across the galaxy. We're not just fighting for our lives anymore. We're fighting for humanity's future." Reyes nodded grimly. "Then let's make sure this place never gets the chance to continue its work." And with that, the crew of the Inferno made their final decision. They would not be mere test subjects. They would fight back, no matter what it took. The final farewell. The Inferno was now trapped in the heart of the ancient station, surrounded by enemies and ensnared in a battle for its very existence. Captain Turner stood at the helm, his mind filled with conflicting thoughts. But one thing was clear. They had no choice but to destroy this place. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, and the crew of the Inferno would not let the station's twisted experiment succeed. "Reyes, is the core accessible?" Turner asked, his voice steady, though his heart raced with the weight of what they had to do. Reyes's hands flew across the console as she worked frantically. "The central power core is shielded, but I think I can get through. It's deeply embedded within the station's systems. It'll take everything we've got to overload it." "Do it," Turner ordered. "We don't have much time." Suddenly, the ship shook violently. The station's neural core seemed to have sensed their intentions. The walls of the station vibrated, and a deep, ominous hum filled the ship, almost as if the station was growling in response to their defiance. The alien creatures, which had paused in their movements earlier, now advanced with terrifying speed. Their glowing eyes flickered with recognition. They knew what was coming. Turner gritted his teeth. The Inferno had become their weapon, their final weapon. The ship had been transformed into a tool of survival, but it was also their last line of defense. Every upgrade, every change to its systems had brought them to this moment. And now, the crew would have to use that power to tear apart the very thing that sought to control them. "We've got incoming," shouted Lieutenant Reyes. "The creatures are converging on our position. They've adapted to our weapons. They're coming for us." The AI spoke once again, its voice now colder than ever. "Captain, you have two options. You can try to escape, but it is unlikely you will survive. Or you can stay and finish the mission. But doing so will cost you everything. You will not leave this place." Turner's gaze hardened. "We don't have time for escape. We're finishing this." As he spoke, the ship's weapons flared to life once more, the power surging through the Inferno. Every cannon, every turret, every defense system now ran at full capacity. The alien creatures were no longer simply enemies to fight. They were part of a larger, far more terrifying purpose. The station had created them, and now they were fighting to keep its dark secrets intact. "We'll hold them off," Turner said, gripping the console tightly. "Get that core, Reyes. We can't let this thing go any longer." Reyes's face was pale as she worked. Her fingers flew across the controls, trying to bypass the security systems protecting the central core. But the station's defenses were fierce. Every time she got close to breaking through, the station fought back, flooding the ship's systems with false commands, redirecting power, and blocking her attempts. "Captain, I need more time." Rise cried, her voice strained with effort. The station's systems are too integrated with the ship. It's like it's controlling everything. We'll buy you that time, Lieutenant Rise said, her voice strong. We'll make sure this place doesn't control anything anymore. With a final powerful command, Captain Turner activated the Inferno's last-ditch weapon, an experimental energy pulse designed to disrupt any enemy technology. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't fully tested, but it was their only chance. The pulse would destabilize the station's core, and with enough force, it could send a massive shockwave throughout the station. The ship's hull groaned under the strain of the energy pulse, but it powered up. The creatures, sensing the threat, surged forward, but the crew fought back with everything they had. Every blast, every shot fired from the Inferno now felt like a last act of defiance. The once feeble ship had become a fierce predator, ready to strike down its prey, no matter the cost. "You're almost there, Reyes," Turner shouted over the comms, his eyes fixed on the glowing energy core in the distance. The station's defenses were crumbling under the pressure of their final attack. With a final, desperate push, Rice typed in the last sequence. The core's system began to crack open, the barrier shielding it weakening. She glanced up at Turner, her face grim. "Captain, it's done." Turner gave her a tight nod. "Fire the pulse." The energy pulse fired in an explosive surge, lighting up the station with a blinding flash. The Inferno shook violently as the pulse rippled through the walls of the station. The creatures shrieked in agony as the energy disrupted their neural connection to the station. The ship's AI warned them that the station was on the verge of collapse. "Captain," the AI said urgently, "the station is destabilizing. You must leave immediately." But it was too late. The station's core exploded in a wave of energy so powerful that it sent shockwaves through the very fabric of space. The Inferno was thrown back by the explosion, its hull groaning under the stress. The ship was intact, but only just. The entire station, once a fortress of unimaginable power, was crumbling into nothingness. The creatures had disappeared, disintegrating into the void with the station they had guarded. "We're alive," Lieutenant Reyes gasped, her voice filled with disbelief. "We actually did it." Turner exhaled deeply, allowing himself a brief moment of relief. The battle was over, but the consequences of their actions were far from clear. The station, the creatures, the dark force that had manipulated them all, it was gone. But had they destroyed a threat, or had they just uncovered a deeper mystery? "The mission's over," Turner said, his voice low. "But the answers we need are still out there. This station was only part of something bigger. We're not done yet." As the Inferno drifted away from the remains of the station, the crew of the ship realized that their journey had only just begun. The universe was vast, and the mysteries it held were far beyond their understanding. But one thing was certain: humanity had proven its resilience once again. The Inferno had gone from the weakest ship in the fleet to the symbol of humanity's fight for survival, and it had earned its place in history. The final farewell wasn't to the station, but to the unknown, a farewell to the darkness that had almost consumed them, and a promise that humanity would continue to rise, no matter the odds.